Welcome to Around the Girdle Earth, the podcast where Dartmouth stories come to life. I'm your host, Yovany Jerez, class of '03, and on each episode, we sit down with members of the Dartmouth alumni community to explore the moments, the mentors, and the memories that shaped them from the green all the way to the great unknown. So, whether you graduated last year or this decades ago, these conversations offer a window into the journeys we have taken and the common threads that connect us all. So grab your favorite drink, step into the story, cue up the nostalgia, and let's wonder together. Today, my very special guest is Peterman, class of 2010. Peter, welcome to the podcast. And why don't we start off by getting a little bit of context of your family and your educational background before Dartmouth?
I grew up in Miami, and I will say with the name Peterman, I feel like people usually assume that I'm not necessarily Latin. But I was born to Pedro Peterman and Lucy Gonzalez. Uh, my dad was born in Havana, and my mom was conceived in Cuba but born in the U.S. So I grew up in Miami, in a very big Latin community. So I will say that that was probably I don't I think growing up, I don't necessarily realize just how immersed in Cuban culture and other Latin cultures I was really until leaving Miami and going to Dartmouth. It was kind of a bit of a big change based on just the culture in Miami, and it really is such an international city. I was lucky enough. Uh, I grew up pretty far away from kind of what everyone thinks of Miami, kind of close to the Everglades side of things.
Ah,
Um, yeah.
yeah, because I lived in Miami Beach for about a year and a half after Dartmouth,
Oh,
and I
nice.
would say, Miami has different geographical pockets with
Yeah, yeah.
different cultures in itself. So yeah, the west side is I
West of
would
the
say,
Turnpike, that has its own designations, but yeah. And then my parents were divorced, so I grew up west of the Turnpike, and that is also a lot more recent immigrants. So not necessarily kind of the Cuban population that I was typically growing up with my dad, who grew up in Hialeah, which is like I think it's the number one city in America for population's first language is Spanish. It's either that or Westchester. It's definitely in South Florida. Um, so I grew up. And it's funny enough because Hialeah is where my dad was. My mom is just south of Westchester, but it is a lot more recent immigrants. So just a lot of different nationalities, not necessarily kind of that Cuban pocket that I had originally grown up in. And lucky enough for sports, I was able to get recruited to a really prestigious academic and mainly Latin high school, Belen Jesuit Prep. It was originally in Havana, Cuba. It started in 1854 by the Queen of Spain. It's a very prestigious and historic school. I was honestly very lucky to have the opportunity to go there because it's not somewhere that my family had ever had history, because I know that that's a big thing for that school. For example, today if you were trying to get a boy in there, it's an all boys school. Um, you pretty much need to be the child of alumni, grandchild of alumni. It's actually pretty difficult now to break in, but luckily for sports, I was able to kind of get invited to try to come to the school, and once I got in, it was probably that was the biggest change for my life in terms of giving me the opportunity to go to a school like Dartmouth. I don't think if I had gone to a different school in Miami, I would have had the same opportunities. And funny enough, I think the football coaches specifically said, had I gone to another school, they might not have been able to make the case for Dartmouth as much, as going to that specific school. And one thing that really stood out to me was how much we wanted to make that connection to the Ivies, and football and Latin football players. So, my senior year at Dartmouth, we had I think 12 Ivy League football players, all from our high school, all
wow.
all Cuban or Venezuelan, I'm pretty sure. Um, yeah, no, all of them would have been Cuban or Venezuelan. I there were three on my team when I graduated. Me and two other younger ones. My two best friends were at Princeton, and they had another younger kid there. It was kind of all over. So
So,
Yeah.
so the who was the matrix of your family? Mom, dad, and you were an only child, or
No, yeah. So I have an older sister, and then I shared a room with a stepbrother for a long time.
okay? Okay.
Um, yeah,
And how
and
was education a theme within your
yeah,
family, or
yeah. So my mom is a public school teacher, and always, IB, AP, kind of high end of public school teaching. And my dad, on the other hand, was a police officer, but he was very, I think my father, more than anyone else, really was, academics are the key to opening doors in your life, and it needs to be something that's really important to you. So, we didn't really have a lot of money, but my dad made it a mission to, not have me go to public schools. I think in South Florida, it's probably a little different than a lot of other places in America. And public schools in South Florida are really defunded, and honestly, kind of anything they can do down there to not support public schools, they really go out of their way to do that. So it was something that my dad wanted to focus on, whatever overtimes he could work as a police officer, whatever else he had to do to make up for that private school payment, he did. And that was part of why I ended up being able to go to this school, because in the elementary schools and middle schools, I was playing against originally in elementary school, playing against the kids that would go to this school. And then my high school was actually a middle school and high school. So I competed against them in the middle school level. And because of that, I caught their attention and was able to go there. So I must credit my dad and my mom. She is the academic of the family. While my dad didn't necessarily have that background, he really understood how much that, can play a role in changing your life.
so the coaches at Belen, and just to be clear, every time you use the word football, you're talking about American football,
Yeah, it's American football. Yeah,
soccer,
no.
right?
I found out now my grandfather actually played linebacker for the University of Havana once upon a
Wow.
time. I have a book. I think it's called American Football in Cuba, something like that. But it goes into the history of American football and Cuba specifically. They've hosted bowl games. The University of Havana had a team and regularly was playing universities in the United States, obviously until 1960. So there was a lot more connection there than I had ever really realized, even before my family came to the United States. But football really was the focus. And I played all sports growing up just by chance. That's kind of where I my personal skills worked out better, and I think as well. I played a couple other sports at Dartmouth even. So I did track at Dartmouth. I did rugby at Dartmouth. So I liked a lot of different sports, but I think football was really the passion and the thing that opened the most doors for me. Because I
So
will say, I
so you got
high school because of
for high
football.
school.
What?
Sorry, for high school, you got recruited into the Belen, this prestigious prep school,
From playing
right?
against them, and the way they actually do it pretty smart. So the junior high or middle school football coach is the varsity coach for the high school. So he's clearly just going around kind of figuring out who he wants to recruit and get into the high school for that program. So that's how that led.
So so basically, sport was the original what opened the door to go to Belen, and then once you're in Belen, obviously they're a feeder school, right? They like for the alumni to go to the top schools,
Yeah.
and certainly among them the Ivy Leagues.
No, and
Did you go to college tours? Like, how did you land on Dartmouth? How did that become to your radar, and so on?
yeah. So we had my high school historically sends a lot of academic schools, or sends a lot of kids for sports to academic schools, right? So, even when I was in younger uh, grades, some of the older guys were going to Carnegie Mellon and the University of Chicago and Johns Hopkins and schools like that. That was pretty regular for where our football team would send kids, or even other sports, because on the track team we have a lot of very good runners, and it was very similar along those lines. Then there was a kid about, and Chris would have probably been 3 years older than me, maybe when he was a senior when I was a freshman. He ended up getting recruited to Princeton. And he was the one who really got in my group of friends' ear when we were younger in terms of, hey, look, you guys you got the right grades, you got the right attitude, you got the right size. if you really dedicate yourselves, this is something that is an opportunity you can take advantage of. And honestly, the Ivy was never something that I realistically had thought of. Honestly, before that, I knew Chris and I knew what he had done, and I knew I could do that. So that really changed my perspective on in terms of what opportunities were even available for me. He was also Cuban American. Chris Gates, spelled kind of French. But so once I kind of had that realization, we worked at it. And I will say our group of friends in high school all ended up, my close-knit group, we had one kid go play football at Northwestern, two go to Princeton. I went to Dartmouth. And then even at the D3 level, I'm pretty sure they went to similarly academic schools. If not, I think University of Chicago was one of them. So that helped, right? We were all in a group that had the same attitude and the same mentality, and we were all kind of thinking about the same types of schools. We all kind of picked a different home run school kind of thing. So for football, it was more of the bigger D1 football schools. So I know one of my buddies at Princeton, he really wanted to go to Stanford. I really wanted to go to Notre Dame. My buddy who wanted to go to Northwestern wanted to go to Northwestern. So kind of worked out. But that was where we kind of picked our dream schools and really started focusing on this, school and sports double and what we could do. And then honestly, sports recruiting kind of takes care of a lot of that for me. It's not my decision, right? So I'd say like the last group of schools I was interested in were the military academies and the Ivies. Once the Ivies actually were committed to recruiting us and saying, no, this is a real opportunity. I can get you in the school type of thing. That was the focus. I wasn't going to, even if an ACC school came around, it wasn't Duke, I probably was not going to take that opportunity.
So help us, for those who are not familiar with sports recruiting.
Yeah.
Right. So help us, give us a little sense of what is that like? Obviously, you're in high school. You're simplifying your sports skills. Your academic skills are also solid.
Yeah.
Right. Because in order to get to Dartmouth, you got to have both.
Yeah.
So how does the coach approach you or approach the school? Like a little bit of that operational sense.
Yeah. So one, I think football coaches, particularly in the Ivies, have learned some tricks, right? So you can't go into every school and overturn every rock. It's just not possible, right? So I think one of the tricks they have learned is, I went to a Jesuit high school, and a significant number of Ivy athletes I've realized are from Jesuit backgrounds and similar academic schools. But I do think to a certain extent, the football coaches realize hey, if we go recruit this school, most of the athletes actually do have the grades to go to a good academic school. So let's take a chance and kind of focus and every year check in and see what they have available. So coming off my junior year, I will say football is also a little different than some of the other sports, because my understanding is I know a lot of you may get recruited your junior year, your sophomore year, but football, it really tends to be relying on how you do your senior year. I had a very good junior year, led my team in tackles, was all county, did a lot of things, and there weren't a lot of solid, real offers, right? So it really is dependent on your senior year. So went into the senior year. I had a good friend of mine, unfortunately, get hurt, which required me to then start both ways instead of just one way. And the side that I wasn't even supposed to play on ended up being the thing that I did the best at. And I will never forget when I met. So I had an all-star practice. I was at the park. And, so sometimes coaches will show up at school. They'll pull you out of school and you just go meet with them and talk to them. They probably sat with our coaches and watched film. Right, we've got all the games cut up for each player, ready for colleges to go, and that was a part of that process. But once the coaches start showing up, it's pretty hit or miss. And for Dartmouth specifically, I was at an all-star practice, and the Dartmouth recruiter for Florida happens to be from Fort Pierce. He's actually currently the head coach, Sammy McCorkle. He showed up at the park that day, watched practice, talked to me. We sat at a park bench for an hour, And he called Buddy Stevens that day, and Buddy Stevens, the old head coach, was at that park the next day at the next practice, talking to me. And more than anything, it was that stood out to me, and just that they really clearly really wanted me. I think there's some schools who put on a show a little bit for players, but maybe they kind of have a different eye for what they expect of that player. Maybe backup or something. We need to fill out the roster. But it became evident to me that Buddy and these coaches had a plan for me, and they really wanted to give me the opportunity. And I will say, lastly, Buddy had played football and hockey. So as I started to go through this process more, Princeton had said, you're not allowed to play more than one sport. Penn had said, well, why don't we take first year off? Maybe we'll let you run track after that. And Buddy and Dartmouth were, hey, you want to do it and you can do it, then we'll let you do it. But if in hindsight, it's tough.
Yeah, I'm scratching my head here because I know the academic workload, and I know what it takes to play at a the varsity sport. You telling me you did 2 varsity sports?
For 2.5 years. My third year, I ended up with surgery and stopped doing track. But yeah, no, and I probably didn't realize what I was getting myself into, because Buddy had, like I said, he was very on board with this plan. He had missed a key detail, which is we are not changing anything of the football program to assist you in doing that. So you have to attend every single meeting, workout, practice as if you're not on the track team. And if the track team can accommodate that, then you can do track. So in winter and spring, I would do a track workout either before classes or in between classes by myself, which was really honestly the hardest part, because running for fun is like not that fun, and that competition and having someone else to kind of fuel you was really helpful. And I lost all that, right? So it's kind of just do it on my own in between classes or before classes, go to class all day, then go to football practice that afternoon. And it definitely took a toll on my body. I got injured. I'd lose a ton of weight. I struggled with just academics in terms of time management. I think the craziest times where there were a few times where I lived in front of the athletic facilities, freshman in East Wheelock, and I think Woodward sophomore year. So they're all right there in front. And multiple times I would walk home and never actually make it to dinner because I would just fall asleep sitting in a chair or something.
Wow. No,
I wake up at 4 a.m. Why am I so hungry?
Yeah. First of all, I relate with your comment about running, because I tried running. Dartmouth has a lot of trails, and it's just beautiful scenery. So I did try it. I gave it a good go, but man, just solo running is not fun. So I shifted to ultimate frisbee, which has a lot of running, but it's in a team setting, right? That's a lot more fun. So now I have good context. You got recruited to Dartmouth through the football team. Buddy Stevens, right? It was the late head coach who died out of a tragic.
Former, he won Ivy championships as a player, won them as a coach, then came back, won them again as a coach after going and coaching the big schools. So he was a big part of my not only coming to Dartmouth, but truly learning to appreciate all that Dartmouth had to offer. Being an alumni, he was very encouraging in terms of not. I came with kind of a sports mentality that yes, obviously I cared about school and all the other things, but what I came here to do was to play football, and he was very helpful in opening my eyes to just. There's a lot of other things going on here. It's a big campus. There's a lot of opportunities, and I wouldn't get so focused on something so narrow.
So I feel like I got a good summary of your 4 years there. Football, track, very little academics. What did you major on?
So I will say I had originally wanted to get into animation. And I had some, I think my creative writing class involved choose your own storybook. So I actually made a DVD where I coded the DVD, and you would go through, and wrote and directed. It was actually probably one of the coolest things I've gotten to do. So wrote and directed kind of a movie, coded the DVD so that, it would pause, you would pick what you wanted to do next, and it would, finish the story that way, writing 16 different endings and kind of working our way back from there. So originally wanted to get into animation. I thought that was really cool. That class really inspired me, but this is where the sports thing really probably came to bite me. So realized very quickly I did not have the time to spend in the rendering studio with animation. It just wasn't going to work. So I pivoted. Around that same time, my sister had gone to law school. So felt like that was probably a good route for me, and switched to history. And then as
Got
well
it.
with being a history major and knowing that I was going to go to law school eventually, I ended up minoring in theater. Felt like I could be a little bit antisocial somewhat, or, just wanted to get more comfortable in terms of like talking in public and getting in front of everybody, and just being comfortable with all that. So yeah, history major, where I was not a theater minor, but there was like one of these 500-person classes that Dartmouth has like 3 of anyways.
Yeah, yeah. Did you join any fraternities?
What?
Did you join a fraternity?
Yeah, so I was in GDX, the football. And when I was there, that was the football fraternity. However, while I was there, it did Beta came back. So that was the beginning of football splitting houses between GDX and Beta, which was nice though, because we ended up absorbing some baseball players and some other sports. And I thought, that it's always just good to not be so narrow. Once again, really open up the doors to just some different avenues and different types of people on campus. And it was a fun experience. I love GDX. I'm not necessarily a big fraternity or sorority person, but I that if it fit with football, really, kind of more of a football clubhouse than anything else.
Tell us a little bit about the people. If there was a high school student understanding, like, what do you mean by fraternities? I'm thinking Animal House, right, which is probably the extreme description of that, right? And I actually think the authors of Animal House graduated from GDX, right? Or
no, and I know that. So we had an interesting time. The GDX is very specifically catered to football players. So for example, right, football season is the fall. Trying to do pledging activities in the fall, running any other house, is really problematic. There's a lot of, I mean, look, senior year when I was the captain, I signed the sheet to tell the NCAA that we did only however many hours, we're supposed to do. And that's when I came to realize, like, oh, it's not a lie, but they just, so much of what we were expected to do was voluntary. But I mean, we were spending 40 hours or more in season doing football activities. I'm watching film, I'm working out, I'm going to practice, I'm breaking down practice footage, I'm watching game footage, I'm going through the game plan, I'm coming up with what we need to be doing that weekend in terms of audibles. So there's a lot of preparation. The work, the stretching doesn't even count for what NCAA considers the rules. So yeah, there's just a really high number of hours that you have to spend,
of course,
on that stuff. And I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, I was curious earlier. Earlier, you started this podcast mentioning how your name might not lend itself to
Yeah,
being recognized as a Latino.
I definitely
I
get
am
that a lot.
curious. Yeah, I'm curious what obviously growing up in Miami, your Latino identity is a given, right?
Right. And in Belen, and I mean, look, I didn't eat. I think Cuban food, Italian, anything outside of Cuban food and Italian food, I don't think I ate that until I was in like Dartmouth. Honestly, like that was just ingrained in my. What was a vegetable? I've never seen one. Like we know how to fry. we know how to fry bananas 3 different ways, but we don't really. We'll sprinkle some peas in arroz con pollo.
Yeah, yeah. Did you connect with other Latinos while on campus, or was your sports still consuming that you didn't get
Yeah.
to
So
experience?
yes and no, and I'm gonna take the blame for this one. So I came from a very conservative Miami family and went through kind of a bit of a personal, change in attitudes during my time at Dartmouth, as I'm sure a lot of kids grow up and mature. And um, so I think when I originally got to Dartmouth, the Latin community at Dartmouth um, is not necessarily made up of kind of the fleeing communism community. That I think is the best way to put it, right?
Sure.
So I don't think I quite fit in when I first arrived. And I would go, try to go to the meetings, go to the Laylack's house, like do that stuff, and particularly because I was so homesick and so used. I mean, the president of my high school didn't speak English. Like I came from such a different world. Like half my teachers, would prefer to speak Spanish. I had kids who graduated my high school class who went straight to Spain for college. Like that was a totally normal thing for me. So it was definitely a bit of a change and shock going to Dartmouth. But I think as my understanding of the world really expanded, I was able to probably have more empathy for people who had different experiences than I had, which allowed me to kind of get a little more involved in that community. And I ended up, I'm a history major, but I am technically within the Latin American history umbrella as well. So my focus was U.S. foreign policy with Latin America, particularly after World War I. So, a lot of important events that guide kind of how all of Latin America even is today was a very big focus for me, and understanding the U.S.'s role in that kind of had a big impact in just changing my views on a lot of different things, and making me a little more empathetic to some of the plight of others that I probably didn't have when I was in such a, just narrow Miami bubble.
Yeah. No, I love your comments because it just simply exemplifies the fact that just because we're Hispanic, we're not homogeneous, right? Even within our own communities, there are stark differences based on the cultural backgrounds and journeys that our respective families have taken. And I could see, I first of all, I could relate to your comments. Same thing, as a Cuban American arriving to Dartmouth, having a very specific experience of fleeing communism, and then coming into an environment that was, a little more open to those leftist ideas and wrestling with that. It certainly allowed grounds for me to go more in depth and explore, and that's probably why I picked sociology to begin with.
Yeah.
I ended up going to study in Copenhagen
Oh,
for
nice.
4 months because I wanted to study the third way, right?
Yeah,
Like the alternative, like the medium between capitalism and socialism. And what I ended up learning there is that no, they're a pretty capitalist society with a strong social benefits,
right.
but I relate a lot with the comments that you're sharing in the sense of like, those 4 years were very formative because it allowed those grounds to explore and wrestle with parts of your identity and be challenged by parts of the identities, and maybe you wrestle with that, form it differently, and then come out completely different.
No, the person I am today, like really truly, like what I hold important, was formed at Dartmouth. I think there was we had a good shell to give Dartmouth, but what formed me in my beliefs, and truly to the core of what I stand for, were definitely formed at Dartmouth.
Yeah. So you early on you realized, hey, I want to become an attorney. You said you were inspired by your sister, and then you sort of became a history major, and we're like, all right, I'm gonna get on this track. Did you go to law school? You graduated and you went to law school right away.
No, so I I was actually going to comment that no, I got to see a little bit of that because the Peterman in the last name, that was Swiss. So I'm actually a Swiss citizen. I'm a dual citizen, U.S. and Swiss, and I used that to go play football in Germany and then in Switzerland.
Wow.
So yeah, no, that was really cool. What an eye-opening experience. There was a guy at Harvard who I played against who wrote a blog for ESPN because he went to play in Italy. And it was relevant at the time because the only John Grisham novel that doesn't have to do with anything law related is actually called Playing for Pizza, just as well researched as any other John Grisham novel. Everything in there is exactly the life kind of I lived in Germany. That book is about going to Parma, Italy. So this Harvard player, shortly after that book had come out, was basically playing in Parma and writing a blog about like, oh, this is what it's like. So I became aware of this and ended up going, using the Swiss citizenship. My great great grandfather was selling cattle for Switzerland, and that's why he was in Cuba. He met my great great grandmother, who had been was French, had been in Haiti. I didn't know this, but after the Haitian Revolution, I guess the French government bought them land in other islands. So they bought land for my French side of the family in Cuba, and he went to some event either at the Swiss embassy or the French embassy and met my great grandmother and decided he was going to stay in the island.
Wow. What a twist.
Yeah. But using that citizenship, I was able to go play over there because you're only allowed 3 Americans. So like my teammates were, all big school. One guy started 4 years for Oregon State, the other guy played at Colorado, and the other guy was Kansas State. But being a dual citizen, I didn't count towards those numbers.
Wow. So football in Europe. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it runs like soccer. So every country, now it's changed a bit, but at the time it ran like soccer. So every country has their own league. So my first year I went and played in the GFL 2. So I was in the second division of the German Football League. We went undefeated. We won. We beat the worst teams from the top division, and we moved up to the top division. And then I transferred to Champions of Europe, Champions of the Champions League. And they were a team in Switzerland that their owner, actually, funny enough, South Florida connection, he got his MBA at Nova Southeastern University, which is in like Fort Lauderdale. And he saw some football, liked it. I know at the time the Miami Dolphins were based out of Nova Southeastern University. Now they've moved closer to the stadium, but at the time it was like, an hour away from the stadium. And I think that connected him where he saw practices and stuff and really fell in love with American football. So he just paid for a ton of guys to play on that team, where I even had that team. I played with a guy from Sweden who had played in the NFL, had worked through NFL Europe to the NFL, a guy from Germany who had done the same thing. There were all us dual passport guys, plus 3 actual like big school Americans. So
wow, what a unique experience. You jump
Yeah.
into football in Europe, and then when did you decide time to go back to law school?
So I actually ended up quitting the second season in Switzerland. I was supposed to take the LSAT in Munich, Germany, and some issues came up with that. If I missed that, I was going to end up having to take another year off. Like, essentially that was the last LSAT to apply for that fall. So once the issues came up, I ended up quitting the team, flying home, and just taking the LSAT back in South Florida.
Got it. And then why did you land at that school?
Yeah, so I went to Florida State for law school, and that was more in-state tuition. I'm all loans, but my parents were very helpful. But I'll say back in high school, my dad said, "You better be smart or good at sports, or preferably both, because I'm going to put you through private school. But when you graduate, good luck. I hope I gave you enough of a head start." And that's how it works. So I got into a couple other schools that were probably a little bit better ranking, but the in-state tuition for the public school tuition as well ended up really making the deciding factor when I did some napkin math on these student loans.
So as we head towards the end of this conversation, can you tell us a little bit about what type of law you're practicing these days?
Yeah, so I do mostly excess insurance defense work. So typical insurance defense attorney, which is what I used to do before I worked at this firm, you know, any business gets sued. There's a significant chance that they have an insurance that would cover that, right? They're not just hiring an attorney on their own. So, my bills would go to insurance companies, but I spent most of my practice defending companies for various, be it contract or personal injury or you name it, honestly. I once I moved to Denver, I was able to switch firms to a firm that kind of specializes in a little more unique. So if you want, just use the example as $100 million in insurance, it's cheaper to get 5 companies to split that up than it is one company 100 million. So I typically work for those second, third, fourth layers of insurance for a company, which means honestly I just work on a lot of very big cases, expensive cases. And honestly, a couple stuff that are in the news you'll see around the country that whether I enjoy it or not is another thing, but usually it's something interesting, different, and it's a bigger value case than typical. And it's getting those secondary, third layers of insurance involved. So still doing the insurance defense side, but now it's really got catastrophic personal injury. If you're talking, I've
Well,
got
I'm in California. There was
$1 million.
fires
Yeah,
earlier this year.
yeah,
That was catastrophic.
yeah. It's got to be catastrophic personal injury or property damage really to hit the numbers that get into the cases that I deal with now. But it's really interesting. I can easily get bored. So, today I might be learning all about electrical lines and how to be a lineman and deal with electrical power lines. And tomorrow will be, how do you engineer a bridge properly? And the day after that will be, how do we hang HVAC at an indoor pool? So it's interesting, which is really what keeps my brain
So
engaged.
it sounds like you spend a lot on YouTube and a lot of time with AI.
Yeah,
Tell
yeah.
me this.
How does this work?
Yeah.
Okay, so the most fun I have is just engaging with our experts because I get to hire. We're talking about such high value cases. I get to hire kind of the best person in their field. As someone who I've been playing American football since I was 8 years old. I've had a case where I got to go against Dr. Amalu, who was like the main doctor that Will Smith played in the Concussion movie. And get to pick his brain on just personal questions about concussions. So stuff like that always is really interesting and just keeping me always engaged with something new and interesting to deal with.
So you mentioned earlier that you got 2 kiddos. You married?
Yeah.
Where's that stage?
Yeah, so I got married, luckily, January 2020. I was like everybody's last party. Yeah, I've got a 3-year-old son and a 1.5-year-old son. I know that Dartmouth is one of the last people who are still, honoring legacies. So I've definitely got the long-term eye to hopefully maybe one day be able to let both these boys bleed green.
Absolutely. So, last question. Have you used the Dartmouth Alumni Network? If somebody was looking at this video,
Yeah.
how would you exemplify the Dartmouth alumni spirit?
Yeah, no, in Miami, even here in Denver, that was a big part of me just getting started. I originally went to law school with the idea to even get involved in sports, front office stuff. Sandy Alderson was general manager of the Mets. He even offered me a job as an intern, coming out of law school. That network was really important. Beyond just the network, right? I got a meeting with the Miami Heat, whose president was a Georgetown guy, and he took the meeting mostly to just be like, "Hey, you should call Dartmouth people. Like, I'm just going to hire a bunch of Georgetown guys, but you should call Dartmouth people. Like, they'll hook you up." And then immediately ended up finding, getting connected with Sandy Alderson and going down that path. Ultimately, I think baseball is not my thing, so that didn't go anywhere. But the alumni network has been crucial throughout this entire time, and even now out here in Denver, where I don't have roots, right? I didn't grow up with any of those connections. They've been really helpful in terms of even just socially, all across the board. I've always been involved with the Dartmouth Club of South Florida, and now Dartmouth Club of the Rocky Mountains, and that's something I would always recommend. It's some of the most impressive people I've ever been able to interact with, and the best part is they're almost always really humble, really nice. It's been incredible, some of the stuff that I've been able to just learn or pick up or make friends with, just based on reaching out, just doing that one extra step, going to a meeting. And now there's probably, I've got on my phone like I think 16 Dartmouth alumni out here in Denver that we can. I got season tickets to the soccer team. Go to the game with me, stuff like that. So it's become integral in not only the social side, but in terms of just opening doors for me.
Wonderful. Well, Peter, I echo your sentiments about the Dartmouth Alumni Network. For all of you who join us online, thank you for being part of this episode of Around the Girdle Earth. If today's conversation sparked a memory or gave you something to think about, leave us a thoughtful reflection in the comment section. And more importantly, please share this episode with a classmate or another fellow alumni. It's a very easy way to keep the Dartmouth spirit alive in this chaotic digital age. So until next time, stay curious, stay green, and keep roaming this beautiful Girdle Earth we call home. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.